Well, hello, I'm Janet Morana, the Executive Director of Priest for Life, also Executive Director of End Abortion US. Welcome back to Just Ask Janet. I know I've been away for a little while, but I am back, and we're going to have a whole lineup each week of great interviews, great guests, lots of information coming your way. Well, I have grandchildren. Some of you do, and some of you are moms, grandmas. I'm a nana. And I'm always looking for a book for my grandkids. And guess what? One of my dear friends, I've known this gentleman almost over 30 years. He's on the board here at Priest for Life and Gospel Life Ministries and also helps behind the scenes here at our ministry, is the famous children's book author, Anthony DeStefano. And we're going to talk about his brand new book that's out now. Anthony, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Janet. Thank you. You always give
Well,
me
of
the
course,
best introductions.
the brand new. First of all, how many children's books have you written now so far?
I think it's something like 15, 16, something like
Yeah,
that.
15, 16. Of
Or
course,
seven, maybe
Anthony,
higher. I'm not sure.
your first children's book is still my favorite, and that's the Christmas book, Little Star. It's still, I can't even read that one without getting choked up at the end. Every time I read it to my grandkids, I still a little bit get verklempt, as they say. I can't help it. But this is your newest book, GreenLee is Growing. And first of all, the title GreenLee, how did you get this name GreenLee? Tell us about that.
Well, I have a goddaughter named GreenLee, and she's very precious to me. I love her very much. And she's got this unusual name, this uncommon name, GreenLee.
Right.
And I've
Right.
always wanted to write a book and dedicate it to her. So I've been thinking the last several years, she's 4.5 now. I've been thinking, what kind of book could I utilize this name in? Obviously, I don't want to write a book just about my goddaughter because who cares
Yeah.
about my goddaughter other than my family, obviously.
Right.
Not so but for a long time I've wanted to write a book also that showed the scope of a whole person's life on earth, that showed a child actually growing older. And so the name GreenLee actually ties into the theme of this book because I think it evokes the word evergreen and youthfulness, and that's part of what this book is about. The book is about the 4 seasons of the year and how they correspond to the seasons of life. So we meet this character of GreenLee when she's a little girl of 3.5 in the springtime of her childhood, if you will, and then the
Right.
book follows her through the summer of her youth and the autumn of her adulthood. And by the end of the book, GreenLee is an elderly lady with gray hair knitting by the fire in the winter of her life. So it's very uncommon for a children's book to show the whole scope of a person's life. But I wanted to write a book like that
Right.
to show children that they're meant to grow in the same way that the flowers and the trees and the grass grow, and also to show them not to be afraid of change, because children are afraid of change. So are adults, and we could talk about that more about that
Right.
later. And mostly, I wanted to write a book that showed that there's potential for great, profound joy in every season of life, including the wintertime. Because even in the winter, there's springtime is always right around the corner, and for Christians, springtime can also mean heaven and the resurrection and life everlasting in heaven, the new springtime. So, and this book is very symbolic in that way too. So I wanted to write a hopeful, optimistic book, and I just got lucky that the name of my godchild, GreenLee, happened to fit in. It was just providential.
Right. Well, of course, we see here the picture here, like you're saying, we start in springtime. And when I think now we are in a lot of parts of the country, spring has happened. The daffodils are popping up and the little crocuses and all that. And of course, Easter is here and upon us. So, what would be the connection of this book, the springtime, with the Lord's resurrection and Easter?
Well, ultimately, I would say this book is about the virtue of hope. As I said just before, it shows that in every stage of life, there's great joy to look forward to. Um, and that there's nothing to be afraid of in terms of change, because God can pull good out of every hard situation. Uh, it also shows, though, that for Christians, the springtime that spring is symbolic of is the new springtime, which is the springtime in heaven. And for Christians, the end of the story of life is not death. That's not, we don't believe even that there is a death. We believe that when we die, it's a moment of transition and we stand before the Lord. For Christians, the end of the story is life, and life everlasting with God in heaven, and eventually the resurrection. So that's the tie into Easter here, because Easter
Right.
is about the resurrection, and this book symbolically is about the
Hmm.
resurrection.
Well, I noticed, Anthony, as I was thumbing through the book, starting from the cover on, the illustrations in this book, and I'm kind of hold it up for everybody, is very different from a lot of your other children's books, like, say, Mary's Wardrobe, Mary's Picture Book, Roxy the Camel, the Puppy. When you look at all those other illustrators you've used, these are very different. So, what made you choose this type of illustration for this book, and why?
Sure. Well, I try to pick my illustrators based on the mission and the purpose of the book. So, if I'm writing a book that features animals like Roxy, the ritzy camel, or the puppy, or the donkey that no one could ride, I want to get an artist who can do animals in a brilliant way and who could put human expressions on their faces. Because after all, these stories aren't really about animals, real
Right.
animals. They're about human beings, but we use animals so that children can enter into the story more easily. Animals are less intimidating than adults. So when I have a book about animals, I use somebody who's great at animals. When I write a book about, say, angels or Our Lady, then I want to convey a theological truth that angels and Our Lady are real. They're not fake. They're not cartoon. They're not pretend. They're not
Right.
comic book characters like children are familiar with. And so what I do is I use artists who have a more photorealistic style. What they draw and paint really truly looks real, and that conveys the theological truth that angels and Mary are real. But this book was different. The point and purpose of this book was to show that life is beautiful, that life is joyful. And so I wanted to find an artist whose style was joyful. And that's what I did. The artist who illustrated this book, her name is Louise Ellis. She's a Brit. She's from Northern England. And I think she's done a magnificent job
Oh, yeah, it's
of,
great.
of and every single page of this book is bursting with
Mhm.
color. And every single page of this book is filled with different kinds of life, whether it's flowers, the trees,
Right.
or there's so many different animals. And there's so many different insects. This book is like a Where's Waldo for children, picking out the
Right.
different animals. And I think what Louise has managed to do, she's managed to capture two theological truths. One of them is that life is beautiful, that life is joyful. But the other deeper truth that she's managed to capture is that God is a God of life, and he's a God of abundant life. So this is why I used Louise as opposed to, say, a photorealistic artist or someone who specialized in animals.
Right. Well, like, yeah, look at this picture here. I'm showing GreenLee here in the spring, summer. This is summer, and there she is. It looks like flying a kite. Beautiful flowers, butterflies. I mean, it's really very whimsical, I think, and it kind of draws. I think it would draw children in. I like this one here by the pool. Right. Everyone can identify that, and especially a unicorn. I don't know if you realize this, Anthony, but for some reason, unicorns are so popular with kids. I know my grandkids, anything with a unicorn on it, you hit a home run, right? And so
Mm.
she wisely made that float in the pool with a unicorn, which I thought was terrific.
I
And then,
I wanted her to try to also capture the truth of every season. So in
right,
childhood, that's that golden magical period when everything is new and innocent. G.K. Chesterton said that, inside the head of a toddler, it's like the seventh day of creation because everything is new. So the
right,
world is wondrous. So I wanted her to capture the wonder of the world in that section. Youth, though, is the time for freedom and first love and self-discovery and that joy of freedom. So I wanted her to be able to capture that. Adulthood is when you're at the peak of your powers mentally and physically. You're running the world, and also you have the incomparable joy of raising your own family of young children. I wanted her to show that. And then old age, which can be challenging, because it's all of the health and physical challenges that people face. There's a saying, old age is not for sissies. Old age can also be a time of great joy, because you don't have the responsibility of raising children. You have the delight in spending time with your grandchildren. You've also hopefully acquired some wisdom in life that you can pass on to others. And also, because the storms of life have passed, hopefully you have more quiet time with God and can grow in an intimate relationship with God, and your life can be more tranquil. I wanted her to be able to capture the essentials of all of those seasons, and I think she did a great job.
Well, I want people to know they can go to our online store at prolifeproducts.org and get a copy of GreenLee is Growing. And, when you think about children, Anthony, the kids can, when they're very young, and actually as they get each grade level, even in school, the first time they go to school, they're afraid. And then sometimes, when they get promoted from one grade to the next, they have a great summer, but then, oh, time to go back to school. Ugh, they get nervous, like, oh, what's this school year going to be about? And then I can think, when they're teenagers, boy, they want to grow up quick, don't they? Like, they can't get to be 21 soon enough, right? And so how does this book help us to kind of slow down and appreciate the time you're in now?
Well, I think, what I try to do even more, uh, is show that they shouldn't be afraid of change. You were just mentioning how children are scared of so many things. I mean, imagine if
Right.
you're a child, you're small. The world is a big place, and everything is new to you. So things that adults take for granted, children, and even young people find petrifying. The trip to a routine doctor's appointment, or you're going to go get
Right.
a haircut, or the first day of school, as you just said, or first day in a
Mhm.
new neighborhood, or more serious things like the death of a pet or the death of a grandparent. These are things that can literally paralyze a child with fear. Now, we know that change is a part of life, but that's become so cliche. What I wanted to do with this book is take that truth that change is a part of life and make it resonate more with children. And the way I do that, Janet, is by showing this girl change. In this book, she goes from being a little girl to an old lady. She passes through every stage of her life, and she does it all in 35, 36 pages. That's a lot of change.
Right.
And yet, throughout the whole book, she's smiling. She's the same GreenLee. She is energetic and exuberant. She has a certain joy of life, and even when she's lost her youth, she's still youthful. So what I really wanted to show was that, while it's normal and okay to be afraid of change, it's possible that good can come out of all of those changes, even the changes that we're most afraid of.
Well, and then here, this is what strikes me too in the autumn when she's a teenager. And as we know, especially for girls, being a teenager can be very challenging. I think in the culture we have now, where you hear about bullying and all these other scary things happen as teenagers, Greenlee looks like she's having a nice time as a teenager. So, what can you say about that?
Well, I want to first say that one of the things I wanted to do with this book was show that the greatest joys of life are the simple ones. This is very important. There's not one cell phone. There's not one video game in this book at all.
Right.
And I think that we've become very used to an artificial life, and that artificial life, which is made up of social media and all the cable TV shows that we watch and all the video games we play, and all the time we spend on our smartphones and our tablets, and all the stuff coming up in the future that's very scary, like artificial intelligence and virtual reality. These things are all artificial, and they add stress to our life because they're all pretend. They're a distraction from real life. And when we have to face real life after living this artificial life, that because we're engulfed in all this technology, it is scary, and we get more stressed out. I think that most of us agree, though, that despite these technological advances, the greatest joys in life are still the simple ones, and those are the experiences that I try to show GreenLee having in this book: going outside, enjoying the summer sunshine, riding on the waves, going to the beach, smelling a bonfire in the fall, spending time with friends, most importantly, spending time with loved ones during the holidays. These are the deepest, most profound joys that we can have. And if you're able to appreciate those pleasures, then it's going to be easier for you to be happier in life. You have to have that attitude of gratitude. You have to trade in expectation for appreciation, because if you have an appreciation of those simple things, then you're already rich. You're starting from a place of abundance. You're starting from a place of joy. Okay,
Right.
so that's one of the things I'm trying to get across in this book as well.
And then, of course, now when GreenLee now has her gray hair here in the winter, she's elderly, probably a grandmother like me and Anna. And what I think happens to a lot of us, especially my age category, I'm 70 now. It's weird. When I turned 70, I was like, oh my goodness, I have my grandchildren, but you start to think, I'm like in the last chapter of my life now, and how much longer am I going to be here to be with the people I love? So, in a way, I think GreenLee now as a grown up could be even more fearful as she gets older, right? And so,
Well,
what advice do you have to us senior citizens here that we can, like, what can we get from GreenLee being here in the winter?
sure. Well, one of the main reasons I wrote this book is because I wanted people to get an idea of perspective. It's never too early to learn about perspective. Children, as well as adults, often live too much in the present, not only in the present moment, but for the present moment. They care too much about instant gratification. They want what is going to please me now. I want this, that, and the other thing. And if I don't get it, watch out. That's the recipe for a very unhappy life, because, as you know, sometimes in the present moment, you don't get what you want. You get irritation and pain and suffering and hospital visits and things like that, especially as you get older. You've got to have perspective. You've got to have a long view. You've got to know that you're going to be old someday. The old medieval monks, Janet, they used to have a saying in Latin: quid hoc ad eternitatem. And that means, what is this in light of eternity? What is this problem that I have now in light of the big things in life, in light of cancer, in light of death and judgment and heaven and hell? You've got to have that long view. Because if you have that long view, then it will be easier for you not to live in anxiety all the time and not to live in overwhelm. You'll be able to realize more that most of life is made up of these small little problems, and not to sweat the small stuff, as the saying goes. So hopefully this book will give children and adults a little bit more perspective about that.
Well, and I know, final question. I know we have a picture we'll be showing of you with your goddaughter, GreenLee. So, what was her reaction the very first moment when you got this hot off the press and showed your goddaughter, GreenLee, a book named after her? So, and you read it to her for the first time. Tell us about that experience.
Well, her mother actually read it to her for the first time. I didn't. I sent the book to her, and of course, she was very happy to see her name in print. And she said, "That's me. That's me." And what was interesting is that she was a little perplexed reading through the book, and she wanted to know, why is she getting older? And she realized, that one day she's going to be old too. And when her grandmother read her the book, the grandmother said to her, "And look at me, I used to be young like you. See,
Right.
one day you'll be old like I am now, but I also was young like you." And I think that will open children's eyes a little bit, and also give them some more empathy for older people, and hopefully treat them with more love and respect once they know that, hey, I'm going to be old someday too and need help.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, it's a great book. I'm looking forward to two of my grandchildren from California are coming here to Florida very soon, and I can't wait to read this book to them. And so thank you, Anthony, for joining me today. And I wish you much success on another beautiful children's book. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jana. It's always great.
All right. Well, brothers and sisters, thank you too for joining me on Just Ask Janet. And a reminder, you can get as many copies as you need of GreenLee is Growing right here at prolifeproducts.org. Makes a great gift for your children or grandchildren. And also, too, you can check our online store of other children's books by our wonderful friend and author, Anthony DeStefano. Well, again, this is Janet, again, joining you on Just Ask Janet. Until next time, thank you and God bless.